for me a bust.
Angry, hostile, exceedingly aggressive with an appetite for destruction. Who would have ever thought that we would go from this to this?
Close your heart to it.
God of War is no stranger to growth and evolution throughout its inception all the way back in 2005. The first game broke the mold by introducing to the world a broken character, out on a quest to rid the painful memories of his horrific past by seeking vengeance on those who prevented his request for healing for his service under then God of War Ares, resulting in a near-complete massacre of the Greek pantheon that spanned 3 epic mainline games with an ensemble of 3 additional spin-off titles. In 2016, developer Santa Monica Studio did the unthinkable and reintroduced this broken character, no longer resembling the essence of what this broken man had become. Instead, we got Daddy Kratos, living his life peacefully in the remote corners of the Norse realm of Midgard with his son, Atreus, as this reboot of the franchise took our expectations of what a God of War game should be and forcefully threw it out the window. It's the same Kratos, but a different era, a different world, a different set of gameplay, and ushered in an entirely new generation of fans while paying deep respect to the games, the saga, and the legacy that came before it. This is God of War, the franchise that grew up.
We will make our own destiny.
Kratos is a fascinating character. His angry, one-dimensional attitude in the Greek saga gave way to some of the most epic and over-the-top moments in all of video games. Developers Santa Monica Studio were pushing the PS2 and PS3 to their absolute limits, pulling off stunts like this. And this, at a time where most games were just playing it safe with games like it at the time. It was the over-the-top action, blood and gore, and desire to see the most epic boss encounters, combos, environments, and set-piece moments that fueled the success of the earlier God of War games during Kratos' time in ancient Greece. By the end of God of War 3, and after the phenomenal and criminally underrated God of War Ghost of Sparta, Kratos was seemingly in limbo. Gamers were kind of over the formula. The linear level design and restrictive camera seemed to get more outdated for players as games were becoming much larger, much grander in scope, and offered many more ways to play. God of War Ascension tried to change up the formula a bit by succumbing to the pressure at the time that every game could only succeed and sell well if there were a multiplayer component to it. And, well, as much as I enjoyed Ascension, the game failed to meet expectations from a critical and commercial perspective. The series had gone dormant. The PS3 gave way to the PS4, and several years into the PS4's life cycle, God of War was nowhere to be seen. Until one day on June 13th, 2016. It was at this E3 when the newest iteration of God of War was announced, and well, and as for if the crowd was excited and ready for the next generation of the franchise, well, here, see for yourself.
Feed us.
So let's go back to the beginning of this video. God of War went from this, and even this, to this, and this. The difference between these two sagas, the Greek and the Norse, are, on paper, night and day. But even if they may have their apparent differences, God of War 2018 and God of War Ragnarok both contain the very same DNA of their original games, distilled to their most pure form. They are, of course, embellished upon and introduce many new elements, but these ingredients that compromised much of the older titles are still here, alive and thriving in the current Norse saga of games, just under different shades, or hues of it. Now, let's take a look at the mid-2000s for a bit, shall we? Teen angst, anger, attitude. This was all commonplace in popular culture back then. We had Jak and Daxter go from a cute and colorful platformer into a more GTA open world inspired and decidedly darker Jak 2 and Jak 3. Even Sonic's counterpart, Shadow the Hedgehog, got his own edgy game around the same time. Games were just getting darker in tone, and gamers who were born in the late 80s and early 90s were growing up and in their teens just wanted something to help them blow off some steam. In came God of War, the game that did just that to players. Copious amounts of blood, dismemberment, finishing moves, and yes, of course, the sex minigames were prevalent in all the mainline God of War titles and were really more than anything a reflection of that time and place of the mid to late 2000s. Many of its fans were in high school, or in college, or even later in life, perhaps ending their days blowing off steam by playing these anger-filled masterpieces after a long, hard day at work. These games answered that itch that people just craved, an excellent, focused adventure with amazing production values and a cinematic quality to violence with impeccable action and set pieces, set to the backdrop of one of the most iconic and well-told mythological backdrops in the history of mankind. We were living out our fantasy as a demigod who traveled these amazing landscapes that we learned of at school or from film, but just in a much more ruthless and bloody fashion. 8 years later, with 6 games under the franchise's belt, things clearly had changed in the early 2010s. Open world games were becoming all the rage, thanks in large part to games like The Elder Scrolls V, Skyrim, Fallout 3, and Grand Theft Auto V that set the bar for what open world games could be and become. God of War, being a linear franchise with a fixed camera with 6 to 8 hours of gameplay per game, felt, well, admittedly a little out of place in this new landscape. Kratos had to go back to the drawing board and plan out his next move, and so he did. Fast forward to 2018, and gamers were cautiously optimistic where the franchise was going. Seeing the debut E3 2016 gameplay and realizing that Kratos is a bit older with a son of his own, players were worried, understandably, about the future of the franchise. Is this going to be another escort mission like Resident Evil 4? Is Sony just trying to milk The Last of Us and put elements of that game in all their first-party titles? Wrong. God of War 2018, colloquially referred to as God of War 4, was and is, in my opinion, the most incredible reboot of any franchise in the history of video games. It kept that same essence of violence and brutal combat, but embellished upon it in ways we never really wanted, but now so dearly cherish. It gave us moments to see a different side of the Ghost of Sparta that we never really saw before, and Atreus was a child that may have annoyed us on more than one occasion, but was generally a likable sidekick that proved to be essential in combat while also receiving important doses of character growth that complemented the transformation of Kratos. Larger emphasis was placed on grounding the characters into the worlds they lived in, with Midgard starting out with its mazes of linear pathways, giving shape to the sheer vastness and openness of the Lake of Nine, transforming a game that had players thinking about it more in its linearity to that of a game where, if I can see it, I might be able to go to it. God of War 2018's more expansive world, a byproduct of the current landscape of games, gave the game the kind of scope that God of War in its early Greek years could only have dreamed of. The Norse legends and myth only further expanded the scope of the world via the humorous lectures of Mimir while leisurely paddling along the Lake of Nine, or by learning the history through well-placed notes and murals dotted along the game's many paths. Side quests, loot, and RPG-like progression systems made their way into this more modern God of War. And guess what? It still retains the key quality and charm that made its past games so excellent in the first place. From the genre-defining and award-winning combat and boss fights, to the epic sense of scale with immense and satisfying quick-time events, to the gorgeous and varied landscapes and a great sense of wonder as the player navigated through the franchise's colorful retellings of mythology, that very essence, or combination of qualities, are still very much present here today. Some players are having difficulty letting go of the previous games and eagerly wish that Santa Monica Studio returned to the more violent, linear, and admittedly simpler style of game. And while that may never happen, the growth of God of War as a franchise never stopped paying its respects to the celebrated roots it came from. Perhaps the single most powerful moment of God of War 2018 was one of the greatest moments in gaming, period, where Kratos ventures back to his home in Midgard with the Phantom of Athena behind his back, reminding Kratos and the player of all the horrible things they had done in Greece, only to see Kratos dig up the very tools that led to his rage in Greece to serve as an instrument to save his own son in the Norse realms. The revealing and reuniting of the Blades of Chaos was a defining moment, and one that many players will remember for a long time to come. The symbolism of these blades are immense. They were the tools of destruction during the Greek saga, a reminder of Kratos' horrific past that led to the deaths of many innocent people, including his very first wife and child. Yet now, they are the instrument, the device that players can not only hack their way through enemies with just like days past, but serves as a larger purpose of allowing that same Ghost of Sparta to restore the health and life of his sick child. Absolutely brilliant stuff. God of War Ragnarok further pays respect to the series' past by disclosing dozens upon dozens of talks throughout the game about Kratos' past, often referring to his own brother, Deimos, the gods that tormented him in Greece, and the various parts of Greek culture that he inherited and are still part of him today. Kratos grew up, and the fans grew up with him, resulting in a franchise that has the staying power to continue to impress and dazzle with each new iteration long into the future. For those who have played God of War Ragnarok, this series has never looked so bright, and as a fan who has stuck with Kratos and the God of War franchise since I was 13 years old when the first game came out, I continue to look forward to growing alongside this legendary franchise.
What's next?
Oh.
If you made it this far into the video, throw yourself a party because you deserve it. Let me know your appreciation by hitting the like button if you enjoyed it and subscribe to the channel if you loved it. I'd love to have you around because real soon I will be doing another giveaway for the holidays, and I will be talking more about God of War Ragnarok. Stay tuned for Monday's video as we will be going over the ways how God of War Ragnarok is the undisputed champion of subverting expectations, culminating in a finale we never saw coming. Thanks again, good people, for all the support, and I look forward to seeing you all real soon in the next video. Peace!